She accidentally sent a voice message calling her boss hot and arrogant, and his reaction left her speechless. Lily Conrad was about to make the biggest mistake of her life, and she had no idea. It was 5:47 p.m. on a Tuesday that refused to end. Her boss, Antonio Castelli, Manhattan's most terrifying mafia boss, had just demanded his fifth impossible task of the day. Lily was exhausted, frustrated, and desperately venting to her sister while juggling color-coded expense reports and a lukewarm latte that was more regret than caffeine, with her phone balanced precariously between her shoulder and ear. "I swear, Emma, this man is going to kill me," Lily whispered into what she absolutely, definitely, 100% confirmed was her sister's private chat. "He just asked me to re-alphabetize the client database using the Italian alphabet." The Italian alphabet. And the worst part? He's standing there in that custom suit looking like some kind of hot corporate villain, all sharp cheekbones and dead-eyed stare, and I can't even be properly terrified because he's unfairly attractive. She hit send with the confidence of someone who'd triple-checked the recipient. The silence that followed was the kind that precedes natural disasters. Lily's co-worker, David, made a choking sound from across the hall. Another secretary actually dropped her phone. The intern in the corner went pale and started frantically packing his desk like he was fleeing a crime scene. "What?" Lily looked down at her screen. Message sent to Castelli Executive Leadership Team, 47 members. Her stomach dropped into her discount shoes. The group chat, the one containing every VP, every department head, every person who could end her career with a single email, lit up like a Christmas tree made of professional destruction. Marco Rossi from VP Finance sent wide-eyed emojis. Giuseppe Andretti from VP Operations replied with a laughing emoji. Alessandro Bruno, head of security, simply typed, "This should be interesting." And then, the notification that made Lily's blood turn to ice. "Antonio Castelli listened to your voice message." "Oh my God," Lily breathed. "Oh my God, I'm dead. I'm actually dead." Hey everyone, before we dive in, don't forget to like and subscribe. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is over there, so you'll be the first to know when the next chilling story arrives. Now, let's get started. The executive floor, usually buzzing with controlled chaos, had gone silent. Every door was cracked open, every eye watching her desk like it was the site of an impending execution. Then she heard them. Footsteps. Not the hurried click of an assistant or the casual stride of a colleague. These were the measured, deliberate steps of a man who had all the time in the world because time itself bent to his schedule. Antonio Castelli emerged from his corner office like a storm given human form. 33, devastating in a way that seemed engineered to destroy professional boundaries, with dark eyes that could calculate your net worth and your deepest fears simultaneously. His three-piece suit was so perfectly tailored it should have been illegal, and his expression, completely, terrifyingly neutral, somehow promised consequences worse than anger. "Miss Conrad," he said, his Italian accent turning her name into something that sounded like both a caress and a threat. "My office. Now." The walk down that hallway felt like a funeral procession where she was both the deceased and the mourner. Lily's mind raced through every possible outcome. Fired, blacklisted, forced to return to Ohio in shame and live with her mother's "I told you so" for the rest of her natural life. Antonio's office was exactly what you'd expect from a man who ran a financial empire that was definitely, absolutely, totally legitimate, and not at all a front for organized crime, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Manhattan, furniture that cost more than her yearly salary, and an atmosphere so intimidating the air conditioning seemed afraid to make noise. He closed the door with a quiet click that sounded like a judge's gavel. "Sit." Lily sat. Her hands were shaking, so she gripped the arms of the chair to hide it. Antonio didn't sit. He stood behind his desk, backlit by the city skyline, looking like every corporate fantasy and nightmare rolled into one impossibly attractive package. "Hot corporate villain," he quoted, his voice maddeningly calm. "Is that your professional assessment of my management style?" Lily's mouth went dry. "Mr. Castelli, I can explain." "Can you?" He leaned forward, palms flat on the desk. "Because I'm fascinated to hear the explanation for how my personal secretary, the woman I've trusted with confidential files, sensitive schedules, and access to information that could destroy careers, thinks it's appropriate to send voice messages calling me unfairly attractive to the entire executive team." "It was an accident," Lily said desperately. "I was venting to my sister. I didn't mean to." "You didn't mean to click on a chat labeled Castelli Executive Leadership Team instead of Emma Conrad?" Antonio's eyebrow arched. "Those seem quite distinct to me, Miss Conrad." Lily wanted to disappear, to melt into the expensive Italian leather chair and cease to exist. I was distracted. The Italian alphabet thing was—" "The Italian alphabet," Antonio interrupted, "is a perfectly logical organizational system for international clients, but that's not what concerns me." He moved around the desk with predatory grace, perching on the edge just close enough to make Lily's pulse spike. "What concerns me is that you think I'm arrogant." "I didn't say arrogant. You said hot corporate villain. The implication is clear." His eyes locked onto hers, dark and unreadable. "So, let me clarify something, Miss Conrad. I have built this company from nothing. I demand perfection because anything less creates vulnerabilities. I maintain control because chaos gets people killed. And if that makes me a villain in your charming little voice messages, then so be it." Lily should have kept quiet, should have apologized and begged for her job, but 6 months of biting her tongue and her sister's voice in her head, reminding her that silence is just another cage, made her do something phenomenally stupid. "You're right," she said, meeting his gaze. "You are a control freak. You reorganize filing systems for fun. You color-code emotions. You probably alphabetize your suits by thread count. And yes, that's exhausting to work for, but—" She took a breath. "You're also the only boss who's ever trusted me with real responsibility, who didn't treat me like decorative furniture, who actually reads the notes I put in your briefings instead of just skimming them. So yes, you're arrogant and impossible and way too attractive for anyone's good, but you're also fair, in your own terrifying way." The silence that followed was different, heavier, charged with something Lily couldn't identify. Antonio studied her for a long moment, then, impossibly, the corner of his mouth twitched. "Way too attractive?" he repeated. "That's the second time you've commented on my appearance." "Miss Conrad." Lily's face burned. "I'm very fired, aren't I?" "Oh, you should be," Antonio agreed. He stood, buttoning his jacket with precise, controlled movements. "Broadcasting your personal opinions about your employer to the entire leadership team is grounds for immediate termination. Calling me a villain, even a hot one, shows appalling judgment." "I understand," Lily whispered, already mentally packing her desk. "However—" Antonio moved to the windows, hands clasped behind his back. "I find myself in an unusual position. Next week, I'm closing the Marchetti merger, a deal worth $300 million that will either secure our position for the next decade or expose us to hostile takeover. It requires absolute discretion, perfect execution, and someone I can trust in close proximity at all times." Lily blinked. "I don't understand." Antonio turned, and his expression was almost amused. "I need a personal assistant for the week. Someone who will work directly with me day and night, managing every detail of this merger. Someone who, despite her catastrophic inability to use group chats correctly, has proven she can handle confidential information, think on her feet, and most importantly, tell me the truth even when it's uncomfortable. You want me to— I want you to move into my penthouse for the next 7 days, Antonio said, his voice dropping into something that made Lily's stomach flip. You'll have your own room, of course, but you'll be available 24 hours a day, Every meeting, every call, every document, we handle it together. Consider it re-education." Lily's mind was reeling. "This is punishment." "This is an opportunity," Antonio corrected. "You think I'm a hot corporate villain? Prove you can survive working directly under one. If you succeed, if you can maintain professionalism, discretion, and competence under pressure, I'll triple your salary and give you a permanent position as my senior executive assistant." "And if I fail?" Antonio's smile was sharp enough to cut. "Then you'll have a very entertaining story about the week you spent living with Manhattan's most arrogant boss before he fired you." He extended his hand. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Conrad?" Lily looked at his hand, at his face, at the absolutely insane proposal that should have sent her running for the exit. But something in his expression, a challenge maybe, or recognition of something equally reckless in her, made her stand and take his hand. "Agreement," she said. "But for the record, I'm not apologizing for the hot comment. That's just objective fact." Antonio's laugh was low and genuinely surprised. "This," he said, still holding her hand a moment too long, "is going to be very interesting." As Lily walked out of his office, employed, promoted, and utterly terrified, she caught her reflection in the glass walls and realized her life had just shifted into something completely unpredictable. Behind her, she heard Antonio's voice one last time. "And, Miss Conrad, delete that group chat. Immediately." "Already done, sir," Lily called back, lying through her teeth as she frantically searched for the delete button, while 47 executives watched her career implode in real time. This was either going to be the best decision of her life or the most spectacular disaster Manhattan had ever witnessed. Knowing her luck, it would probably be both. The door to Antonio's office closed behind Lily with a soft click that sounded like a cell door locking. She stood frozen just inside the threshold, her hands clasped in front of her like a defendant awaiting sentencing, while Antonio moved to the windows with the unhurried confidence of a man who'd never been told no in his life. The silence stretched. Manhattan glittered below them, oblivious, indifferent, completely unaware that Lily Conrad's career was imploding 63 floors above street level. "Sit," Antonio said without turning around. Lily sat. The leather chair was probably worth more than her car, and somehow that made everything worse. She was about to be fired in a chair that cost 5 figures. Antonio finally turned, and the dying sunlight behind him cast his face in shadow, making him look like every dangerous fantasy she'd ever been foolish enough to entertain. He leaned against the window frame, arms crossed, studying her with an intensity that made her skin heat, despite the Arctic temperature of her panic. "Hot corporate dictator," he said, his Italian accent turning the words into something that sounded almost intimate. "Is that how you see me, Miss Conrad?" Lily's throat was desert dry. "Mr. Castelli, you didn't mean to send it to the entire executive team, clearly. But did you mean the words themselves?" He moved closer, perching on the edge of his desk, directly in front of her. Close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and woodsy that probably cost more than her rent. "When you called me unfairly attractive, were you lying?" This was a trap. Everything about this moment screamed trap, but Lily's brain had apparently abandoned ship because she heard herself say, "No, I wasn't lying." Something flickered in Antonio's dark eyes, surprise, maybe, or satisfaction. "And the arrogant monster part? The control freak?" "Also accurate," Lily said, her self-preservation instincts finally kicking in too late to save her. "Sir, with all due respect, you color-code your emotions. You reorganize filing systems based on longitude. You once made an intern cry because he used the wrong shade of blue in a PowerPoint. If that's not control freak behavior, I don't know what is." Antonio's jaw tightened. For a terrifying moment, Lily thought she'd finally pushed too far. Then his lips twitched, not quite a smile, but close enough to make her heart stutter. "You're right," he said quietly. "I am a control freak. I'm demanding, exacting, and utterly intolerant of mediocrity. Do you know why? Because you enjoy making people suffer? Because imperfection gets people killed." The words were sharp, carrying weight that suggested personal experience. "In my world, Miss Conrad, a misplaced decimal point isn't a typo. It's a liability that costs millions. A forgotten meeting isn't an oversight. It's an opening for competitors to destroy everything I've built. Control isn't a personality flaw, it's survival." Lily swallowed hard. "I understand, and I'm sorry, truly. If you want my resignation, I don't want your resignation." Antonio stood, moving behind his desk to retrieve a folder. "I want your complete, undivided attention for the next 7 days." Lily blinked. "I don't understand." "Next Monday, I'm closing the Marchetti acquisition. $300 million, 6 international partners, and more moving pieces than I can manage alone." He opened the folder, revealing contracts covered in red ink and sticky notes. "It's the most important deal of my career, and it's also the most dangerous. There are people who would prefer I fail, people who might take aggressive steps to ensure that failure." "You mean corporate espionage," Lily said slowly. "Or worse." "I mean exactly what you're thinking." Antonio's gaze locked on hers. "Which is why I need someone close to me who no one would suspect. Someone whose presence seems incidental. Unthreatening." Lily's stomach dropped. "You want me to be bait. I want you to be camouflage." Antonio moved around the desk again, and suddenly he was close enough that Lily had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. The clumsy secretary who spills coffee and sends embarrassing voice messages? No one looks twice at her. No one suspects she's actually observing, processing, reporting back to me. "This is insane," Lily whispered. "This is necessary." Antonio's voice dropped, taking on an edge that was almost possessive. "You've worked for me for 6 months, Lily. In that time, I've watched you navigate this company with a combination of genuine competence and strategic chaos. You make people underestimate you, which means they're careless around you. They say things, do things, reveal things they'd never expose to someone they perceived as competent." "I am competent." "I know you are," Antonio interrupted. "That's my point. You're brilliant at playing the fool while being anything but foolish, and I need that skill. I need you." The way he said, "I need you," made something flutter dangerously in Lily's chest. She stood abruptly, putting distance between them because proximity to Antonio Castelli was clearly making her lose her mind. "So let me understand this correctly," she said, her voice shaking slightly. "You want me to move into your home, pretend to be your hapless assistant, and spy on people who might literally kill you if this deal goes wrong?" "Yes. And in exchange for this completely reasonable request, you're offering triple your current salary, effective immediately. After the deal closes, assuming we both survive," his lips quirked, "I'll make you my senior executive assistant with full benefits, profit sharing, and enough authority to make the people currently laughing at your voice message very nervous." Lily stared at him. "You're serious." "I'm always serious, Miss Conrad. It's one of my more annoying qualities, as you've documented." Antonio returned to his desk, pulling out a contract that looked suspiciously pre-prepared. 7 days. You'll have your own room, your own space, but you'll be available 24 hours a day for meetings, calls, whatever I need. Think of it as intensive training." "You called it re-education earlier," Lily pointed out. "I was being diplomatic." Antonio's smile was sharp. "The truth is, I'm fascinated by you. By the woman who can look at me, at everything I represent, and still have the courage to call me an unfairly attractive corporate villain where anyone could hear. That's either stupidity or bravery, and I don't hire stupid people." Lily's hands were trembling. This was insane, reckless, potentially dangerous. Everything about this screamed that she should decline, walk out, and never look back. but she'd spent her entire adult life playing it safe, working entry-level jobs, keeping her head down, making herself small and forgettable. And where had it gotten her? A cramped studio apartment, student loan debt, and the constant anxiety of one missed paycheck away from disaster. Antonio Castelli was offering her danger, yes, but also possibility, power, a chance to be something more than the clumsy secretary everyone overlooked. "One condition," Lily heard herself say. "I want creative control over my cover story. If I'm going to play the hapless assistant, I do it my way. No scripts, no micromanaging. You trust me to sell it." Antonio's eyes gleamed with something that might have been approval. "Agreed. Any other demands?" "I want a panic button, something I can activate if things go wrong. You'll have a direct line to my head of security and a GPS tracker that Alessandro monitors personally." Antonio extended his hand across the desk. "Do we have an agreement, Miss Conrad?" Lily looked at his hand, strong, scarred across the knuckles in a way that suggested this CEO knew how to do more than sign contracts. This was it. The moment she either made the smartest or stupidest decision of her life. She took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, and sent electricity up her arm that she absolutely, definitely, 100% should not be feeling for her boss. "Agreement," she said, "but for the record, I'm still right about the Italian alphabet thing. That's objectively insane." Antonio's laugh was low and genuinely surprised. "This," he said, still holding her hand a moment too long, "is either going to be the best decision I've ever made or the one that finally destroys me." "Probably both," Lily said, pulling her hand back before she did something catastrophically stupid, like notice how his thumb had traced her palm. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., pack for a week." Antonio returned to his chair, already pulling up files on his computer like they hadn't just agreed to the most insane arrangement in corporate history. "And Lily?" She paused at the door. "Yes? Don't delete that group chat just yet." His smile was dangerous and far too attractive. "I want them wondering. Let them speculate about what happened in this office. Let them worry. You want them to think—" "I want them to think exactly what they're already thinking," Antonio said, "that I'm keeping you close for reasons that have nothing to do with your secretarial skills. Fear and curiosity make people sloppy. Sloppy people make mistakes. And mistakes give you control," Lily finished, understanding dawning. "You're using me as a distraction." "I'm using you as a weapon, Miss Conrad. The question is whether you're brave enough to let me." Lily should have been offended, should have walked out. Instead, she smiled, sharp and reckless, and entirely too pleased with herself. 6 a.m. tomorrow, Mr. Castelli. Don't be late." She left before he could respond, but she heard his low laugh follow her into the hallway, where 47 employees were absolutely, definitely not staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to scandalous fascination. David from accounting actually applauded. "I can't believe you survived that." "Neither can I," Lily admitted, pulling out her phone to text her sister the most important message of her life. "Lily, I just agreed to move in with my boss for a week. I'm either about to become powerful or a crime statistic. Either way, it's going to be interesting." Emma. "What?" Lily. "I'll explain later. I need to pack. And maybe pray. Definitely pray." As she gathered her things from her desk, Lily caught her reflection in the glass walls and barely recognized herself. Flushed, excited, terrified, and completely, utterly alive. Antonio Castelli had just turned her career-ending disaster into an opportunity. Now, she just had to survive it. The car Antonio sent for Lily arrived at precisely 5:45 a.m., 15 minutes early, because of course it did. It was a Blacktown car with leather seats that probably cost more than her security deposit, driven by a stone-faced man who introduced himself as Mr. Castelli's driver, and then proceeded to not speak for the entire 30-minute journey to the Upper East Side. Lily spent the drive second-guessing every life choice that had led to this moment while clutching her hastily packed duffel bag and trying not to throw up from anxiety. The building was exactly what she'd expected. A pre-war masterpiece with a doorman who looked like he moonlighted as a Secret Service agent, and a lobby that featured actual marble columns and a chandelier that probably required its own insurance policy. "Miss Conrad," the doorman said, somehow making her name sound like an accusation. "Mr. Castelli is expecting you. Penthouse level. The elevator requires a key." He handed her a small gold keycard like he was granting her access to a nuclear facility. Lily took it with shaking hands and stepped into an elevator paneled in mahogany and mirrors that showed her exactly how out of place she looked. Rumpled coat, messy hair, and an expression that screamed, "I don't belong here." The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, because of course Antonio Castelli's home required its own private access. What Lily saw made her stop breathing. The space was obscene. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a 270-degree view of Manhattan from Central Park to the financial district. The floors were polished hardwood that reflected the morning light like water. Everything, and she meant everything, was perfectly placed. Modern furniture in shades of cream and charcoal, abstract art that probably came from galleries Lily couldn't afford to enter, and a complete absence of anything that suggested an actual human lived here. It looked like a museum exhibit titled, "How Billionaires Live." "You're early," Antonio's voice came from somewhere to her left, and Lily jumped, nearly dropping her duffel bag. He emerged from what appeared to be a kitchen, all stainless steel and marble countertops, wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled to his forearms. No tie, top button undone, hair slightly damp like he'd just showered. It was the most casual she'd ever seen him, and somehow that made him more devastating rather than less. "You said 6 a.m., Lily managed. "I didn't want to be late." "Smart." Antonio gestured toward a hallway. "Your room is the second door on the right. You have your own bathroom. I've had my housekeeper stock it with toiletries, but if you need anything else, there's a list on the counter with contact numbers." "You have a housekeeper," Lily said faintly. "I have a staff," Antonio corrected, "but they don't live here, and I've given them the week off except for essential deliveries." "Security reasons. It's just us." "Just us." The words hung in the air, loaded with implications that Lily absolutely should not be contemplating. She followed him down the hallway, hyper-aware of how her sneakers squeaked on the pristine floors. Her room was bigger than her entire apartment, a king-sized bed with white linens, more windows, and a bathroom that featured both a rainfall shower and a soaking tub. "This is insane," Lily whispered. "This is how I live," Antonio said from the doorway. "Unpack. We have our first meeting in 45 minutes. I'll expect you in the study. Down the hall, last door, at 6:30. Coffee preferences? Anything with caffeine?" "Helpful." His lips twitched. "I'll figure it out." He left before Lily could respond. She dropped her duffel on the bed and just stood there, trying to process that this was her life now, that she was living in a penthouse with her terrifyingly attractive boss who might or might not be connected to organized crime, and definitely, absolutely was using her as some kind of strategic pawn in a deal worth hundreds of millions. "This is fine," she told her reflection in the bathroom mirror. "This is completely normal and fine, and you're definitely not going to do something stupid like develop feelings for him." Her reflection looked unconvinced. The incident happened at 6:47 a.m. Lily had successfully navigated getting dressed, professional but not trying too hard in black slacks and a cream blouse, and had even found the study without getting lost. What she hadn't successfully navigated was the coffee Antonio had left for her on a side table. She'd been reaching for the mug while simultaneously trying to read the contract he'd handed her, and her elbow had caught the edge of the table. The coffee, expensive-smelling, perfectly brewed coffee launched itself through the air in what felt like slow motion before landing directly on an antique Persian rug that probably cost more than a car. "Oh my God!" Lily gasped, dropping to her knees immediately. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry!" Antonio looked up from his desk where he'd been typing on his laptop, saw the spreading coffee stain, and went very, very still. "That rug," he said slowly, "is a 19th century Tabriz. It's worth approximately $40,000. Lily wanted to die, actually physically cease to exist. "I'll pay for it. I'll get it cleaned. You'll stop panicking and sit down," Antonio interrupted. He stood, moving around his desk with that controlled grace that suggested he was either very calm or very, very angry. "It's a rug, Lily. An expensive rug, but still just a rug." "A $40,000 rug that I just destroyed?" "That you just christened," Antonio corrected. He crouched down beside her, close enough that Lily could feel the heat radiating off him. "This penthouse is a museum. Nothing in it has been lived in, used, touched by anything real. You just made it human." He looked at her, and his expression was softer than she'd ever seen it. "Stop apologizing." "I don't understand," Lily whispered. "You should be furious." "I should be," Antonio agreed. "But I'm not. I'm relieved." He stood, offering her his hand to help her up. "Every person who enters this space treats me, like something fragile and untouchable. You walked in and immediately made a mess. It's oddly refreshing." Lily took his hand, letting him pull her to her feet. They were close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough that his cologne was doing dangerous things to her ability to form coherent thoughts. "I'm still paying for the rug," she said. "You're definitely not paying for the rug." Antonio released her hand, but slowly, like he'd had to remind himself to let go. "Now sit. We have work to do, and you're already 7 minutes behind schedule." They worked through the morning, Antonio explaining the intricacies of the Marchetti deal while Lily took notes and asked questions that seemed to surprise him with their sharpness. By noon, Lily had forgotten to be intimidated by the surroundings and was actively arguing with him about a contract clause she thought was vulnerable to exploitation. "This liability waiver is too broad," she insisted, pointing to paragraph 17. "If something goes wrong during transfer of assets, this language could be interpreted to protect them while exposing you." Antonio leaned over her shoulder to read the section, close enough that his breath stirred her hair. "My attorneys reviewed this." "Your attorneys missed it," Lily countered. "Look, any and all circumstances beyond reasonable control is vague enough to drive a truck through. They could claim almost anything was beyond their control and void their obligations." He was quiet for a long moment, reading and rereading the clause. Then, "You're right. How did my legal team miss this?" "Because they're looking for obvious traps," Lily said. "This isn't obvious. It's subtle, clever, the kind of thing someone would only include if they were planning to use it." Antonio straightened, and when he looked at her, his expression had shifted into something intense and almost possessive. "You see things others miss." "I read things others skim," Lily corrected, suddenly uncomfortable with the weight of his attention. "It's not special, it's exactly what I need," Antonio interrupted. He moved back to his desk, already pulling up his attorney's contact. "This is why you're here, Lily, not because you're clumsy or chaotic, because you're sharp enough to catch what everyone else misses." As he spoke rapid Italian into his phone, probably terrifying some poor lawyer, Lily realized something that made her stomach flutter with equal parts excitement and terror. Antonio Castelli didn't want her here as camouflage or distraction. He wanted her here because he trusted her mind, her instincts, her ability to see through the polish to the problems underneath. And that was infinitely more dangerous than any corporate espionage or mafia connections, because trust, real, genuine trust, was the one thing Lily had never learned how to protect herself against. The explosion happened on day 3 at precisely 9:47 a.m. over a filing system. Lily had been organizing the Marchetti contracts, all 47 versions, each with different amendments, when Antonio emerged from his study with an expression that suggested someone was about to die. "Where?" he said with terrifying calm. "Is the Henderson addendum from March 15th? Lily looked up from the organized chaos spread across his dining table. "The Henderson addendum is with the March contracts, filed under H for Henderson." "It should be filed under M for March," Antonio said. "That's the system. Chronological, then alphabetical by primary party. You've been here 3 days, Lily. This isn't complicated." Something in his tone, the barely concealed frustration, the assumption that she'd simply been careless, made Lily's own frustration bubble over. "Your system is complicated," she countered, standing to face him. "It's unnecessarily, pointlessly complicated. You file by date, then party, then document type, then amendment number. That's 4 organizational layers for a single piece of paper. Do you know what happens when systems are that rigid?" "They maintain order," Antonio said coldly. "They create vulnerabilities," Lily shot back. "Your system is so predictable that anyone with basic access could figure out exactly where sensitive documents are stored. They could anticipate your filing patterns, predict what you'll do next, and exploit that predictability. I filed Henderson under H because it's intuitive, because someone looking for patterns wouldn't think to check there first." Antonio went very still. "You intentionally violated my system." "I intentionally made it less hackable," Lily corrected. "Your perfect organization is a roadmap for anyone who wants to steal from you. Chaos, strategic chaos, is actually more secure because it's unpredictable." The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush. Antonio moved closer, and Lily realized she'd just accused one of Manhattan's most powerful men of having a fundamentally flawed approach to his entire business structure. "You're saying," Antonio said slowly, "that my system, the system I've used to build a multi-billion-dollar company, is wrong." "I'm saying it's predictable," Lily clarified, refusing to back down even though her heart was hammering. "And predictable systems get exploited by smart people. Your attorneys, your executives, your competitors, they all know how you think. They can anticipate your moves because you follow the same patterns. But me?" She gestured to the reorganized contracts. "I'm chaotic, inconsistent, which means I'm unpredictable, and unpredictable is harder to exploit." Antonio stared at her for a long moment. Then he moved to the table, studying her reorganization with intense focus. He pulled up several files, checking her logic, testing her reasoning. Finally, he looked up. Show me how someone could exploit my system." Lily's breath caught. "What?" "If you're right, if my predictability is a vulnerability, prove it." Antonio pulled out his laptop, opening his firm's digital filing system. "Show me how an insider could use my patterns against me." Lily moved beside him, her earlier anger transforming into focus. She pulled up the file structure, tracing the hierarchical organization. "Okay, let's say I'm Marco Rossi, and I want to embezzle funds without detection. I know you review financial reports every Monday at 2 p.m. I know you always check the most recent files first, then work backward chronologically. So I bury my fraudulent transaction in a file dated 2 weeks ago, knowing you'll prioritize newer data. By the time you reach the older files, if you reach them, the transaction is already processed and the money's moved." Antonio's expression had gone from skeptical to intensely focused. "Continue. Your email system follows the same pattern. You respond to priority flags first, then work by sender hierarchy. So I send a legitimate-looking email with a high-priority flag, knowing it'll be at the top of your queue. You open it, maybe approve something routine, and miss the attached secondary document that actually contains the problematic clause." "That's happened," Antonio said quietly. 3 months ago. A contract amendment I didn't fully review because it came through the priority system from a trusted source. Because your system trains you to trust the structure more than the content, Lily said. Rigid organization creates blind spots. You assume that if something's filed correctly, categorized correctly, it must be correct. But what if someone uses your own system to hide things in plain sight? Antonio was silent for a long moment, his jaw tight. Then, incredibly, he laughed, short and sharp, but genuine. You're right, he said, and the admission seemed to cost him something. I've been so focused on maintaining control through structure that I created a structure vulnerable to anyone who understands it. He looked at her with an expression that was equal parts frustration and admiration. How did you see this? Because I've never fit into rigid systems, Lily admitted. I'm too disorganized, too chaotic. So I learned to navigate around structures instead of within them. It's a survival skill when you're always the person who doesn't quite belong. Something shifted in Antonio's expression, recognition maybe, or understanding. Before he could respond, Lily's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, then groaned. What? Antonio asked. I just got a calendar reminder for a meeting that happened yesterday. Lily's face flushed. I set the alert for the wrong date. Again. How do you consistently confuse dates? It's a gift, Lily said dryly. Right up there with my ability to trip over flat surfaces and spill coffee on priceless artifacts. As if summoned by her words. Lily turned to grab her phone from the table and somehow, she genuinely had no idea how, managed to catch her sleeve on the laptop's power cord. The cord yanked, the laptop tipped, and Lily lunged to catch it. She succeeded in saving the laptop but crashed into Antonio in the process, sending them both stumbling backward. Antonio's arms wrapped around her reflexively, steadying them both. For a suspended moment, they were pressed together, Lily's back against Antonio's chest, his arms locked around her waist, both of them breathing hard. I saved the laptop, Lily said weakly. You nearly killed us both, Antonio countered, but there was something in his voice that wasn't quite anger. His breath was warm against her ear, and Lily became hyper-aware of everywhere they were touching. His chest against her back, his arms around her waist. His hands splayed across her ribs. I should probably let go, Antonio said quietly. Probably, Lily agreed. Neither of them moved. Then Antonio's phone rang, shattering the moment. He released her immediately, stepping back to answer with his usual clipped professionalism. Lily used the interruption to flee to the bathroom, where she pressed her palms against the cool marble counter and tried to remember how to breathe normally. 3 days. She'd been here 3 days, and she was already having moments with her boss that felt like something out of a romance novel written by someone with a vendetta against her common sense. When she returned, Antonio was off the phone and had reorganized the contracts using a hybrid of his system and hers, chronological with strategic chaos elements. This, he said, gesturing to the new organization, is better, more secure, less predictable. He looked at her. You're right more often than you're wrong, Lily Conrad. That's unsettling. Why unsettling? Because I've spent 10 years building systems designed to eliminate variables and uncertainty, and you walk in and prove that uncertainty might actually be my best defense. Antonio's expression was complicated, frustrated, but also intrigued. You're the variable I didn't account for, the chaos I didn't plan for, and somehow you're exactly what I need. Lily's heart was doing dangerous things. Is that a compliment or a complaint? Both, Antonio said, definitely both. He returned to his study, leaving Lily standing in the dining room. Reorganizing contracts and trying not to think about how his arms had felt around her waist, or the way he'd said, exactly what I need, like it meant something more than professional utility. This was supposed to be temporary, strategic, a week-long arrangement that would end with a promotion and a return to normal professional boundaries. But nothing about the way Antonio looked at her, or the way she was starting to look back, felt temporary. It felt like the beginning of something that could either save them both or destroy everything they'd built. And Lily was starting to suspect it might be both. Day 5 arrived with thunderstorms that turned Manhattan into something from a noir film. All shadow and rain-slicked streets, and the kind of atmospheric drama that felt appropriate for Lily's current emotional state. They'd been working for 14 hours straight, preparing for preliminary meetings with the Marchetti representatives. Antonio's dining table had become war room central. Contracts, financial projections, and enough coffee cups to caffeinate a small army. At 11 p.m., Antonio finally leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes with the heel of his palm in a gesture so uncharacteristically vulnerable that Lily felt something crack in her chest. "Take a break," she said. "You're going to burn out before the actual meeting." "Can't afford to burn out," Antonio replied, but he didn't reach for another document. Instead, he stood and moved to the windows, watching rain streak down the glass. "This deal has to close. There's no alternative." Lily joined him at the window, maintaining careful distance. "What happens if it doesn't?" "Best case? I lose $300 million in significant market position. Worst case?" Antonio's jaw tightened. There are people who've invested not just money, but reputation in this deal. If it fails, they'll view it as betrayal, and people in my world don't forgive betrayal. "That's why you're so careful," Lily said quietly. "Why everything has to be perfect, because imperfection isn't just costly, it's dangerous. You understand." Antonio glanced at her, surprise flickering across his face. "Most people think I'm controlling because I enjoy it. They don't see the necessity." "I grew up poor," Lily said, "not struggling middle-class poor, actually poor, the kind where you learn to count every dollar because one mistake means you don't eat that week. You learn to be careful because carelessness has consequences." She wrapped her arms around herself. "Different world than yours, but I get it. The need for control, the fear of what happens when things slip." Antonio turned to face her fully, his expression intense. "How did you end up working for me?" "Student loans, mostly," Lily said with a weak laugh. "Turns out a liberal arts degree and charming personality don't pay rent in Manhattan. I needed a job that paid enough to survive, and Castelli Global Finance was hiring. I figured I'd last 6 months, pad my resume, and move on." She met his eyes. "That was 6 months ago." "Why did you stay?" "Because you were interesting," Lily admitted. "Everyone said you were impossible, demanding, terrifying. But I watched you work, and I realized you weren't cruel. You were careful. You demanded perfection because the stakes were real, and that made sense to me in a way nothing else in corporate Manhattan did." Thunder rumbled outside, and rain intensified against the windows. Antonio moved closer, close enough that Lily could see the exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders that never quite released. "I haven't been surprised by another person in years," Antonio said quietly. "Everyone in my life wants something. Money, power, access, protection. They perform versions of themselves designed to appeal to what they think I want. It's exhausting and isolating and entirely predictable." "And then I sent that voice message," Lily said. "And then you sent that voice message," Antonio agreed, his lips twitching. "Calling me hot and arrogantly terrifying like you genuinely couldn't decide if you wanted to kiss me or kill me." "To be fair, I still haven't decided," Lily said without thinking, then immediately wanted to die. I didn't mean, I know exactly what you meant." Antonio's voice had dropped into something lower, more intimate. "Because I have the same problem. You're chaos incarnate, Lily Conrad. You spill things, break things, reorganize my entire life with your beautiful, frustrating unpredictability. You should drive me insane." "But," Lily's heart was hammering, "but you're the first real thing I've encountered in a decade," Antonio finished. "You don't perform. You don't calculate how to appeal to me. You just exist, honest and clumsy and brilliant and completely, utterly yourself. It's terrifying and addictive in equal measure. They were standing too close now, close enough that Lily could feel the heat radiating from him, see the precise moment his gaze dropped to her lips before jerking back up to her eyes. "Antonio," she whispered, and it was a warning or a plea or both. "I know," he said roughly. "This is inappropriate, unprofessional. You work for me, you're living in my home, and I have no right—" "You have every right," Lily interrupted, surprising herself with her boldness. "I'm here by choice. I stay by choice. And if I'm honest, which apparently is my defining characteristic, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you since that voice message. Not as my boss. As you." Antonio's control visibly frayed. His hand lifted, hovering near her face like he was fighting the urge to touch her. "If I start this, I won't want to stop. I'm not good at casual, Lily. When I want something, I become obsessive, possessive, completely insufferable." "I've seen you obsessive," Lily said, her voice shaking slightly. "I work for you, remember? I know exactly how intense you get, and I'm still here." "You don't know what you're saying." "I know exactly what I'm saying." Lily closed the remaining distance between them, looking up at him with challenge and invitation combined. "I'm saying I'm tired of pretending this is just professional. I'm saying I see you, not the CEO, not the reputation, but you, the man who reorganizes filing systems at 2 a.m. because he can't sleep, who secretly reads my margin notes and uses my suggestions, who laughs when I'm clumsy instead of getting angry because you're just as lonely as I am and you're tired of pretending otherwise." Antonio made a sound that was half laugh, half groan. "You're going to destroy me." "Probably," Lily agreed, "but you're going to let me anyway." His restraint snapped. Antonio's hand cupped her face, tilting her chin up, and for one suspended heartbeat, they just stared at each other, both terrified, both wanting, both completely aware they were about to cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Then his phone rang. Antonio closed his eyes, forehead dropping to rest against Lily's as he visibly fought for control. "I need to take this. It's Marco. He's supposed to confirm the meeting location for tomorrow." "Answer it," Lily said. Though every cell in her body was screaming at that phone to spontaneously combust. Antonio stepped back, putting professional distance between them before answering. "Marco, tell me you have good news." Lily moved to the table, using the interruption to remember how to breathe. Her hands were shaking, her heart racing, and every nerve ending was acutely aware that they'd been seconds, literal seconds, from kissing, from starting something that would change everything. Antonio's conversation was brief and clipped. When he hung up, he didn't immediately return to where Lily stood. Instead, he gripped the back of a chair, knuckles white, breathing carefully. "The meeting is confirmed for tomorrow at 2 p.m., he said without looking at her. "We should get some sleep. It's going to be a long day." "Antonio, don't." He finally looked at her, and his expression was raw with want and frustration. "Don't say anything kind or understanding, or that makes me want to forget every professional boundary I'm barely maintaining. Go to bed, Lily, please, before I do something we can't take back." Lily should have argued, should have pushed, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the barely leashed control, and recognized it for what it was. Antonio Castelli, trying to protect her from his own intensity. "Okay," she said quietly. "But Antonio? For the record, I wouldn't want to take it back." She left before he could respond, but she heard his sharp intake of breath and knew the words had hit exactly as intended. In her room, Lily pressed her back against the closed door and tried to process what had just happened. They hadn't kissed, hadn't crossed that final line. But everything had changed anyway, because now they both knew. The attraction wasn't one-sided, the tension wasn't imaginary, and whatever was building between them was powerful enough to terrify a man who controlled everything, Tomorrow, they'd face the Marchetti deal. Tomorrow, they'd be professional and careful and maintain appropriate boundaries. But tonight, they'd both lie awake in separate rooms, thinking about what almost happened and wondering if they'd made the right choice by stopping. Lily suspected neither of them would get much sleep, and she was absolutely right. Day 6 began with coffee, contracts, and the creeping feeling that something was wrong. Lily couldn't pinpoint it at first, just a nagging discomfort that sat in her stomach like a stone. She and Antonio were reviewing final documents for the afternoon meeting, maintaining careful professional distance after last night's almost kiss, when Marco Rossi arrived for a preliminary briefing. "Everything's ready," Marco said, spreading updated files across the table with practiced efficiency. "I've confirmed all parties, secured the location, and triple-checked every contract clause. The transfer of assets will proceed exactly as planned." He smiled, confident and perfect, and something about that perfection made Lily's skin crawl. She'd seen Marco around the office for months, always impeccably dressed, always precisely on time, always with exactly the right answer. He was Antonio's most trusted VP, the one who'd been with the company since the beginning, the one everyone said was being groomed for partnership. But watching him now, Lily noticed something off. His organization was too perfect, his documentation too flawless, every contingency planned, every variable accounted for, every scenario mapped with mathematical precision. It reminded her of something, but she couldn't quite. "The Hendricks file," Lily said suddenly, interrupting Marco mid-sentence. Both men looked at her. Marco's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "What about it?" Antonio asked. "I misfiled it 3 months ago," Lily said, her mind racing. "Remember? I archived it under the wrong client code, used HDK instead of HEN because I was rushing and didn't double-check the abbreviation system. You were furious, made me spend an entire weekend reorganizing the archives to prevent it happening again." "I remember," Antonio said carefully. "What's your point?" "The point is that misfiled document should have been caught during the quarterly audit," Lily said, still staring at Marco. "But it wasn't, because the audit found everything exactly where it should be, perfectly organized, nothing out of place. Which should have been impossible because I know I misfiled it." Marco's expression remained pleasant, but something flickered in his eyes. "Perhaps you fixed it and forgot. Administrative errors happen." "I didn't fix it," Lily said firmly. "I remember because I meant to fix it and got distracted. That file should still be misfiled. But according to the audit you conducted, Marco, everything was perfect. Too perfect." Antonio had gone very still, his gaze moving between Lily and Marco with sharpening focus. "Are you suggesting Marco falsified audit results?" "I'm suggesting that someone with access to the filing system could use its predictability to hide things," Lily said. "Antonio's system is so rigidly organized that anything out of place should trigger immediate notice. But what if someone deliberately made sure nothing was ever out of place in their sections? What if someone was using that perfection to mask manipulation?" "That's absurd," Marco said, but his smile had frozen into something artificial. "I follow Antonio's systems precisely because precision prevents fraud." "Or enables it," Lily countered. She moved to Antonio's laptop, pulling up the filing system. "May I?" Antonio nodded, his expression unreadable but intense. Lily navigated to the Hendricks file location. According to the audit records Marco submitted, this file was correctly placed under HEN 2024 Q1, but I misfiled it under HDK 2024 Q1. Let me check something. She pulled up the file's metadata, creation date, modification date, movement history. Her stomach dropped. "This file was moved," she said quietly. 3 days after I misfiled it. Moved from HDK to HEN, by someone with administrative access." "I corrected your error," Marco said smoothly. "That's literally my job, catching mistakes before they become problems." "Except you didn't tell anyone you corrected it," Lily said. You just moved it and reported in the audit that everything was perfect. No errors, no corrections needed. Why wouldn't you document the correction? Why wouldn't you tell Antonio that his secretary was making filing errors that required fixing? Silence. Heavy and damning. Antonio stood slowly, his voice dropping into something lethal. Marco, why didn't you report Lily's filing error? I didn't think it was worth bothering you with, Marco said, but sweat had appeared on his forehead. Minor administrative issue, easily fixed. Nothing is minor in my systems, Antonio interrupted. Everything gets reported. Every error, every correction, every deviation from protocol. That's the rule. You know that's the rule because you helped me create that rule. His eyes narrowed. Unless you had a reason to want errors to go unreported, unless you were using my system's rigidity to hide your own manipulations. Lily's heart was racing. She pulled up more files, searching for other anomalies. Antonio, can you pull up Marco's personal submission records for the last 6 months? Antonio did, his jaw tightening with each screen. Marco's submissions were perfect. Every report on time, every document flawless, every financial record balanced to the penny. No one is this perfect, Lily said. People make typos, miss deadlines, have occasional discrepancies, but Marco's records show 0 errors, 0 delays, 0 anything that would trigger closer examination. It's not humanly possible unless someone is carefully curating what gets submitted, Antonio finished, his voice like ice. Making sure nothing ever raises flags because perfect records don't get audited. They get approved and filed away. Marco's mask finally cracked. You're believing a clumsy secretary over me? Over 8 years of loyalty? I'm believing evidence, Antonio said coldly. He pulled up his phone, typing rapidly. Alessandro, I need you at the penthouse. Now. Bring the security team and pull all access logs for Marco Rossi's accounts for the last 12 months. Marco stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. I'm not going to stand here and be accused by someone who can't even file documents correctly. Sit down, Antonio commanded, and the sheer authority in his voice made Marco freeze. You're not going anywhere until Alessandro arrives, and then you're going to explain exactly how you've been using my systems against me. I don't have to explain anything. You're right, Antonio agreed. You can explain to me, or you can explain to the authorities I call after Alessandro confirms what I suspect, that you've been systematically embezzling funds, manipulating records, and positioning yourself to sabotage the Marchetti deal. The color drained from Marco's face. You can't prove that. I can prove your records are suspiciously perfect, Lily said. I can prove you moved files without documenting it. I can prove you've been hiding errors instead of reporting them. And if we dig deeper, if we look at every perfect transaction you've processed, I'm willing to bet we'll find patterns. Money moving in ways that benefit you. Contract clauses that create vulnerabilities you can exploit. A systematic, careful dismantling of Antonio's empire hidden inside the perfect execution of his systems. Marco's expression twisted into something ugly. You're a secretary who's been here 6 months. You think you understand how this company works? I built this place with Antonio. I earned my position by pretending to be loyal while systematically betraying him, Antonio finished. His phone buzzed. Alessandro is 2 minutes away. You have 2 minutes to decide if you want to tell me the truth or if you want to explain yourself to people far less patient than I am. Marco looked between them. Antonio's cold fury, and Lily's determined certainty, and seemed to deflate. The Marchetti deal, he said finally, his voice bitter. I'm not the only one who wants it to fail. There are people who've invested significant resources in ensuring you don't close this acquisition, people who paid very well for inside information and cooperation. Who? Antonio demanded. Does it matter? Marco laughed bitterly. You trusted me, believed I was loyal, and all this time I was using your own perfectionism against you. Every system you built, every rule you enforced, I used them all to hide what I was doing. And I would have succeeded if your clumsy little secretary hadn't made a mistake that didn't fit my pattern. Lily felt cold. The meeting tomorrow. What's going to happen? Marco just smiled, and it was the most terrifying thing Lily had ever seen. You'll find out, he said. 2 p.m., exactly on schedule. The penthouse door opened and Alessandro entered with 3 security personnel. Antonio gave rapid instructions in Italian, and within moments Marco was being escorted out, still wearing that terrible smile. When they were alone, Antonio turned to Lily, his expression raw with fury and something that looked like fear. He's planned something, Antonio said, for tomorrow's meeting, something catastrophic. Then we don't go, Lily said immediately. If I don't show, the deal collapses. Months of work, hundreds of millions of dollars, and my reputation, all destroyed. Antonio moved to the windows, staring out at the city. But if I do go, I'm walking into whatever trap he's set. Lily moved beside him, her mind racing. Then we change the trap, use my chaos against his perfection, make it unpredictable. Antonio looked at her, and despite everything, he almost smiled. You want to fight a carefully planned betrayal with improvisation? I want to fight predictability with chaos, Lily corrected. Because that's what caught him, wasn't it? My mistake, my imperfect filing that didn't match his perfect pattern. So we make everything imperfect tomorrow. Change the timeline, the location, the approach. Be so chaotic that whatever he's planned can't possibly account for it. Antonio studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled her against him, crushing her into a fierce embrace that had nothing to do with romance and everything to do with survival. You saved my life, he said into her hair. You saw what everyone else missed, what I missed. We saved each other, Lily corrected, holding him just as tightly. Now we just have to survive tomorrow. As they held each other in the gathering darkness, both knew that the real battle was just beginning, and that chaos might be their only weapon against a betrayal years in the making. The meeting location was a converted warehouse in Red Hook, all exposed brick and industrial chic, the kind of place where Manhattan's elite pretended to appreciate authenticity while surrounded by security that cost more than most people's mortgages. Lily watched from the control room 2 floors above, surrounded by monitors showing every angle of the space below. Alessandro stood beside her, armed and tense, while his team maintained positions throughout the building. This is a mistake, Alessandro said for the 3rd time. We should have canceled, postponed, something. Antonio doesn't postpone, Lily said, her eyes tracking Antonio's arrival on the monitors. He moved through the space with his usual controlled confidence, flanked by his attorneys and looking like he owned the building, which he probably did. The Marchetti representatives were already seated, 4 men in expensive suits who radiated the kind of old money power that didn't need to announce itself. They stood as Antonio approached, and the negotiations began with the formal precision of a carefully choreographed dance. Everything seemed normal, professional, exactly as planned. That's when Lily knew something was catastrophically wrong. It's too perfect, she whispered. Look at the timing. Everyone arrived exactly on schedule. The documents are positioned exactly where Marco said they'd be. Even the lighting. Alessandro, is it just me, or is this entire setup following Antonio's usual patterns exactly? Alessandro's expression sharpened. You think Marco's still in play? I think Marco spent 8 years learning exactly how Antonio operates, Lily said, her pulse racing. And I think whatever he planned, he built it into the structure of this meeting itself. Make it look normal, make it follow the expected pattern, and then… The screens went black. What just happened? Lily demanded. Alessandro was already on his radio, speaking rapid Italian. His face went pale. The building's network just isolated. We're cut off from external communications. The exits have engaged emergency locks. That's not possible, Lily said. "We're using Antonio's personal security system, which Marco helped design," Alessandro finished grimly. He grabbed his phone, but there was no signal. "We're in a Faraday cage. Someone's activated electromagnetic shielding. Nothing gets in or out." Lily's stomach dropped. Below, on the now fuzzy monitors running on battery backup, she could see confusion starting to ripple through the meeting. Antonio was on his feet, his attorneys checking their dead phones, the Marchetti representatives looking equally bewildered. Then the doors burst open, and men in tactical gear flooded the space. "Oh my God," Lily breathed. "He's framing them, making it look like the Marchetti family set a trap. Antonio will think they betrayed him. They'll think he betrayed them, and Marco walks away clean while both sides destroy each other," Alessandro finished. "We need to get down there." "We'll never make it through the locks in time," Lily said. Her mind was racing, searching for options, for any weakness in Marco's perfect plan. Perfect plan, perfect execution, perfect timing. And then she remembered, she'd never been perfect. She'd been clumsy, chaotic, the secretary who accidentally triggered systems she wasn't supposed to touch. "The emergency broadcast system," Lily said suddenly. "The old one, the analog system from before the building was renovated, is it still active?" Alessandro frowned. "Technically, yes, but it's not connected to the main network. It runs on separate circuits, completely isolated. It's basically useless." "It's perfect," Lily interrupted, "because Marco wouldn't account for it. His plan relies on digital systems, on predictable protocols. But the old analog emergency system?" She was already moving, searching the control room. "That's chaos. That's the mistake I would make." She found it in the back corner, a metal box covered in dust, with a switch labeled Emergency Broadcast, Analog Override. The kind of system only a clumsy secretary would accidentally activate while reaching for something else. "What are you going to do?" Alessandro asked. "Something completely, catastrophically chaotic," Lily said. She grabbed her phone, still useless for calls, but the audio recorder worked, and held it up to the broadcast system's input jack. "Marco's trap relies on perfect timing, right? Everything synchronized to trigger at exactly the right moment?" So I'm going to make noise." Lily hit record on her phone and started singing. Badly, deliberately off-key, every terrible pop song she could remember mashed together into sonic chaos. Then she connected the phone to the analog system and cranked the volume to maximum. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. Every speaker in the building, ancient analog speakers that predated the digital renovation, erupted with Lily's terrible, distorted singing. The sound was so loud, so unexpected, so completely wrong that everyone below froze. More importantly, the analog signal created electromagnetic interference that rippled through every digital system in the building. "It's disrupting the Faraday cage," Alessandro said, staring at his phone as a single bar of signal appeared. "The analog system is creating noise that's interfering with Marco's digital lockdown." His radio crackled to life. Backup teams outside were suddenly reachable. Alessandro was shouting coordinates, calling for immediate intervention. Below, the chaos intensified. The tactical team, clearly thrown by the unexpected disruption to their timing, hesitated. That moment of hesitation was all Antonio needed. Lily watched him move, fast, efficient, and absolutely lethal. He grabbed the nearest tactical operative, disarmed him with brutal precision, and used the weapon to cover his attorneys and the Marchetti representatives. "Get them out!" Antonio shouted, and his own security team, freed by Alessandro's emergency call, flooded in from exterior positions. The ambush collapsed. Marco's perfectly timed trap, disrupted by Lily's chaotic intervention, fell apart into confusion and mistakes. Within minutes, the tactical team was subdued, the Marchetti representatives were secured safely, and Antonio was standing in the center of the wreckage, breathing hard, alive. Lily abandoned the control room and ran, taking stairs 2 at a time until she burst into the warehouse space. Antonio saw her and moved, crossing the distance between them with that predatory grace that made her heart stutter. He grabbed her, pulling her against him with enough force to steal her breath. "You saved me. Again. How did you—" "I made noise," Lily gasped, her hands fisting in his jacket. Terrible, chaotic, off-key noise that disrupted Marco's perfect digital timing. Antonio kissed her. Desperate, fierce, and completely overwhelming. His hands cupped her face like she was precious and breakable, even as he kissed her like she was the only real thing in his carefully constructed world. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Antonio pressed his forehead to hers. "Your chaos," he said roughly, "is the only thing that could save my perfectly controlled life. Do you understand that? You're the variable that makes everything work." "I just sang really badly into an old microphone," Lily said, but she was grinning, giddy with relief and adrenaline and the feeling of his arms around her. "You disrupted a multi-million-dollar ambush with off-key pop music," Antonio corrected. "You're magnificent and insane and completely, utterly mine, if you'll have me." Lily pulled back enough to see his face, vulnerable and intense and looking at her like she'd personally rearranged his entire universe. "Is that a question or a statement?" "Both," Antonio said. "Definitely both." Around them, Alessandro was coordinating cleanup. The Marchetti representatives were recovering from shock. Authorities were arriving to take Marco's hired tactical team into custody. But in the center of the chaos, Antonio and Lily held each other, the man who'd built his life on control and the woman who'd saved him with beautiful, terrible unpredictability. "Take me home," Lily whispered. "I think we need to have a very long conversation about what happens next." Antonio's smile was sharp and possessive and promising things that made Lily's pulse spike. "Home, yes. And then we're going to discuss exactly how permanent I intend this arrangement to be." "Permanent?" Lily's heart stuttered. "Did I stutter?" Antonio pulled her closer. "You're not leaving, Lily Conrad. Not now, not ever. I hope you understand that." "That sounds suspiciously like a proposal," Lily said. "That sounds exactly like a proposal," Antonio agreed. "We'll discuss terms at home, preferably before I lose what's left of my sanity." As they left the warehouse, surrounded by security but completely focused on each other, Lily realized her chaotic mistake 6 days ago hadn't just saved her career, it had saved both their lives. And maybe, just maybe, it had given them both something worth living for beyond survival. Each other. The penthouse felt different at 2 a.m. on day 7. Quieter, more honest. Like all the carefully maintained facades had finally crumbled, leaving only truth. Lily sat on Antonio's pristine leather couch, the one she'd been afraid to touch a week ago, wearing his oversized MIT t-shirt and clutching a glass of wine she desperately needed. Antonio sat beside her, jacket discarded, shirt partially unbuttoned, looking more human and vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "I almost died today," Antonio said quietly, "because I trusted perfection more than I trusted my instincts. Marco's records were flawless. His loyalty seemed unquestionable. Everything about him fit perfectly into my systems, and that perfection blinded me." "You couldn't have known—" "I should have known," Antonio interrupted. "You saw it. You who'd been here 6 months caught what I missed in 8 years, because you weren't looking for perfection. You were looking for truth." He turned to face her fully. "Do you remember what you said in that voice message? The one that started all this?" Lily's face heated. "I called you hot and arrogantly terrifying, not my finest moment." "You called me a control freak," Antonio corrected. "An arrogant monster who color-codes emotions and makes people cry over PowerPoints. And you were completely, brutally right. I built my entire life around control because I was terrified of chaos, of uncertainty, of trusting anything I couldn't predict and manage. Control kept you alive," Lily said. "There's no shame in that. Control almost killed me," Antonio countered, because it made me rigid, predictable, vulnerable to anyone who understood my patterns. You saved me, Lily, not just today, but every day this week. You walked into my perfectly organized life and made beautiful, necessary chaos. You challenged my systems, called out my flaws, and refused to be intimidated by the carefully constructed image I show the world. He set down his wine and took both her hands, his grip gentle but intense. I need you to understand something. I don't just want you here for a week. I don't just want you as my assistant or my strategic chaos consultant or whatever professional title we can invent. I want you, permanently, completely, as my partner in every sense of the word. Lily's breath caught. Antonio, let me finish, he said urgently. I'm offering you my name, my life, my complete trust and loyalty. I'm offering you equal partnership, not just in our relationship, but in my company. I want to create a position for you, Chief Strategy Officer. Someone whose job is to challenge me, to find the flaws in perfect systems, to bring necessary chaos to rigid structures. You want to pay me to be chaotic? Lily said weakly. I want to build an empire with you, Antonio corrected, one where perfection isn't the goal. Truth is, where we value intuition as much as data, where your brilliant, unpredictable mind has equal weight to my strategic planning. His thumb traced circles on her palm. Marry me, Lily Conrad, not because it's convenient or strategic, because I love you, because you're the only person who's ever made me want to be less controlled and more human. Lily felt tears burning her eyes. That's the most romantic and terrifying proposal I've ever heard. It's the only proposal you've ever heard, Antonio pointed out, his lips twitching. True. Lily took a shaky breath. But I have conditions. Antonio's expression sharpened with interest. Name them. First, you dismantle the parts of your life that require you to be cold, the parts that made you think you had to be perfect to survive. I don't want the CEO mask, I want you. Messy, vulnerable, occasionally unreasonable you. Agreed, Antonio said immediately. What else? Second, we do this as equals. You don't get to protect me by hiding things or making decisions without me. If we're partners, we're actually partners. No secret planning, no for your own good nonsense. Harder, but agreed, Antonio said. Continue. Third, Lily's voice softened. You let me teach you that imperfection isn't weakness, that making mistakes doesn't mean failure, that being human, clumsy, chaotic, occasionally wrong, is actually the bravest thing you can be. Antonio was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his lap, wrapping his arms around her like he was afraid she'd disappear. I spent 10 years building walls, he said into her hair, convincing myself that control equaled safety, that perfection was the only defense against a world that wanted to destroy me. And then you walked in with your terrible filing system and your honest voice messages and your complete inability to be anything other than authentically yourself, and those walls just crumbled. Lily pulled back to see his face. Is that a yes? That's a yes to all your conditions, Antonio said. Yes to being messy and vulnerable. Yes to equal partnership. Yes to learning that imperfection is strength and... He cupped her face gently. Yes, to spending the rest of my life proving that you didn't just save me. You made me want to be saved. That's very romantic for a former control freak, Lily said through tears. Former? Antonio's smile was crooked and self-aware. I'm still going to be insufferable sometimes, demanding and precise and occasionally unreasonable about filing systems. I know, Lily said, kissing him softly. But now I get to call you out on it. Officially, as your equal partner and future wife. Future wife, Antonio repeated, like he was testing the words. I like that. Though we should probably discuss timeline. No, Lily interrupted, laughing. No timelines, no perfect planning, no color-coded wedding binders. We're doing this chaotically, imperfectly, however it happens. Antonio looked genuinely pained. You're going to make me have a disorganized wedding, aren't you? I'm going to make you have a human wedding, Lily corrected, with mistakes and spontaneity and moments that don't go according to plan. And you're going to love it because it'll be real, us, imperfectly perfect. Antonio groaned, but he was smiling, genuinely smiling in a way that transformed his entire face. You're going to be the death of my carefully maintained reputation. Probably, Lily agreed, but you'll be too happy to care. Already am, Antonio admitted. He kissed her again, slower this time, savoring rather than desperately claiming. When they broke apart, he pressed his forehead to hers. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough to send that voice message, Antonio said. For being honest enough to call me arrogant. For being strong enough to stay when most people would have run. For saving my life in about 17 different ways this week. For teaching me that chaos isn't the enemy, it's the solution. Lily's heart was so full it hurt. You know what the best part is? What? This entire thing started because I made a mistake, Lily said, because I was clumsy and careless and sent a message to the wrong group. My imperfection created this. Us. Antonio's smile was soft and wondering. Your imperfection is my salvation, Lily Conrad. Don't ever change. I won't, Lily promised, but you're going to have to change a little. Starting with accepting that I'm probably going to spill coffee on at least 3 more priceless items before the month is over. I'm prepared, Antonio said solemnly. I've already contacted my insurance company. They laughed, and it felt like coming home, to each other, to themselves, to a future built on truth instead of perfection. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the pre-dawn darkness. Inside, the man who'd built his life on control and the woman who'd saved him with chaos held each other and planned an imperfectly perfect future together. It was messy and beautiful and completely, utterly right. 6 months later, Castelli Global Finance looked subtly but fundamentally different. The changes weren't obvious to outsiders. The offices were still sleek, the marble still gleamed, the executives still wore expensive suits. But insiders noticed. There was laughter in the hallways now, collaboration instead of competition, and most surprisingly, there was a new department on the executive floor with a nameplate that made visiting clients do double takes. Chaos Strategy Unit, Chief Strategy Officer Lily Castelli. Lily, now officially Lily Castelli after a wedding that had been beautiful, chaotic, and featured her tripping over her own dress during the ceremony, sat in her office reviewing quarterly reports when Antonio appeared in her doorway. Your color-coding risk assessments, he observed, leaning against the frame with a smile that still made her heart stutter. Ironically, Lily clarified, red for this plan is too perfect, yellow for needs more chaos, green for appropriately messy. I'm teaching your executives to think like me. Terrifying, Antonio said, but he was grinning. Board meeting in 10 minutes. Ready to tell them why we should deliberately introduce inefficiencies into the new acquisition strategy? Born ready, Lily said, gathering her files, which were organized in a system only she understood, but which had somehow become the company's most effective analytical tool. The meeting went exactly as Lily had planned. Contentious, challenging, and ultimately productive. She presented data showing that their most successful deals had involved elements of improvisation and adaptation, while their near failures had relied too heavily on rigid planning. The board, initially skeptical, couldn't argue with results. You're saying, one board member summarized, that we should plan to be unplanned? I'm saying strategic chaos beats rigid perfection, Lily corrected. Every time, because markets change, people are unpredictable, and the ability to adapt is worth more than the illusion of control. Antonio, watching from his seat at the head of the table, looked insufferably proud. Any objections? Silence. Then grudging agreement. The Chaos Strategy Unit's approach was officially adopted company-wide. After the meeting, as they walked back to Antonio's office, which now contained an entire corner dedicated to Lily's organized chaos, she caught him smiling at his sleeve. "What?" she asked. "You got coffee on my jacket this morning," Antonio said, showing her the small stain near his cuff. "During breakfast, while you were gesticulating about market volatility." "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. Don't be," Antonio interrupted, pulling her into his office and closing the door. "Do you know what I did after you spilled it?" "Immediately took it to be dry cleaned because you're you?" "I left it," Antonio said. "I wore a jacket with a coffee stain to a board meeting, and no one died. The company didn't collapse. The world kept turning." He pulled her close, his hands settling at her waist. "You've taught me that imperfection isn't catastrophe. It's just life. Beautiful, messy, chaotic life." Lily's eyes burned with happy tears. "That might be the most romantic thing you've ever said, and you literally proposed to me in the middle of an action sequence." "That was adrenaline," Antonio said, kissing her softly. "This is truth. You didn't just save my life that day, Lily. You taught me how to actually live it, how to be human instead of controlled, how to find strength in chaos instead of rigidity." "You're still pretty controlling," Lily pointed out. "You reorganized my office last week." "I helped optimize your organizational system," Antonio corrected with dignity. "There's a difference. You color-coded my sticky notes by urgency level, and you immediately rearranged them by vibe," Antonio countered. "Which somehow works better than my system. It's infuriating, and I love you desperately." Lily laughed, pulling him down for a proper kiss. "I love you too. Control freak tendencies and all." "Recovering control freak," Antonio corrected against her lips. "Thanks to you." They were interrupted by a knock. Alessandro poked his head in, saw them wrapped around each other, and sighed. "Should I come back?" "Yes," Antonio said. "No," Lily said simultaneously. "What's up?" "Alessandro?" "New security protocols need approval," Alessandro said, entering with a tablet. "After Marco's betrayal, I've redesigned our entire system. It's completely unpredictable. Randomized checks, variable schedules, intentional chaos built into security procedures." Lily grinned. "You've learned well." "I learned from the best," Alessandro said seriously. "The woman who saved Antonio's life by singing badly into a microphone. If that's not strategic chaos, nothing is." After he left, Antonio pulled Lily back into his arms. "You know what's strange?" "What?" "A year ago, I would have said my perfect life was my greatest achievement. Perfect control, perfect systems, perfect execution. Now?" He looked around his office, at Lily's sticky notes on his windows, at the coffee stain on his jacket, at the beautiful chaos she'd brought into his carefully ordered world. "Now I realize my perfect life is the one where nothing's perfect, where you spill things and question my plans and make me laugh at board meetings, where chaos isn't the enemy, it's the point." Lily's heart was so full she could barely breathe. "That's very philosophical for a Wednesday afternoon." "That's very dismissive for a woman who literally married me," Antonio countered. "True." Lily pulled him close, resting her head against his chest where she could hear his heartbeat. Steady, strong, alive because she'd been clumsy enough to send a voice message to the wrong group 6 months ago. "For the record, I wouldn't change a thing. Not the message, not the chaos, not even Marco's betrayal, because it all led here, to us. To this imperfectly perfect life." Antonio's arms tightened around her. "To think it all started because you called me hot and arrogant." "You are hot and arrogant," Lily said, "but you're also kind and protective and brave enough to admit when you're wrong. That's the man I fell in love with. The real one, not the perfect image." "The real one is much better," Antonio agreed, "because the real one has you." They stood there in his office, her office, their shared space where control and chaos had learned to coexist, and realized that sometimes the best things in life came from mistakes, from imperfection, from being brave enough to be clumsy and honest and completely authentically yourself. Lily Conrad had accidentally sent a voice message calling her boss hot and arrogant, and Antonio Castelli had responded by falling in love with the chaos she brought into his life. It was messy and beautiful and unpredictable and perfect in all the ways that actually mattered, just like them. 3 years later, the headline in the Wall Street Journal read, "Castelli Global Finance Revolutionizes Corporate Strategy with Chaos Theory Approach." Lily, reading it over breakfast while simultaneously spilling orange juice on the business section, laughed. "They're calling your company revolutionary. Remember when you fired people for suggesting changes?" "I never fired anyone for suggesting changes," Antonio protested, rescuing the newspaper. "I fired them for suggesting stupid changes. Your changes are brilliant." "My changes are chaotic," Lily corrected. "Same thing," Antonio said, kissing her juice-sticky lips. "In your case." The Chaos Strategy Unit had expanded to 3 full floors. Companies around the world were hiring consultants to teach them strategic unpredictability. And Antonio Castelli, once known as Manhattan's most controlling CEO, was now famous for saying his greatest business decision was hiring someone brave enough to call me arrogant and smart enough to be right about it. They'd built an empire on imperfection, on trust instead of control, on the radical idea that chaos, when combined with strategy and love, could create something stronger than any rigid system. And it had all started with one clumsy secretary's accidental voice message. The best mistakes they'd learned were the ones brave enough to become beautiful truths. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, subscribe, and tell me your rating from 1 to 10. And don't forget to check out the next video waiting for you.